Hey, I'm Kay. Welcome to Kay's Chit-Chat, where your quiet thoughts become stories and your stories might help someone else feel less alone. Emma was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, her hands still wet from washing her face. And she saw a woman smiling back at her. Not the forced smile she used to put on every morning before work, but a smile so natural it took her a second to realize it was her own reflection. 6 months. It had been 6 months since she woke up without an alarm clock, without hearing fire trucks screaming down the street, without rushing to make coffee while buttoning her shirt. 6 months since she moved into this apartment. The one with windows looking out at the park, with a bookshelf that covered an entire wall, and with Liam. Liam. His name echoed in Emma's head like a warm, low note. She reached for a towel, dried her hands, and as she did, her eyes accidentally glanced through the small opening that looked into the living room. He was sitting at the dining table, leaning forward slightly, his right hand holding a coffee cup, his left hand resting on the table with fingers tapping a soft rhythm. The familiar beat he made whenever he read the news. Emma realized she was holding her breath. She let the air out slowly, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. 6 months already, and still every morning she had to do this. Look at him from a distance, notice the tiny little details, and tell herself, he's really here, he's really mine. She walked out, barefoot on the wooden floor, the planks creaking under her weight. Liam looked up, and his eyes met hers like a warm hand on her shoulder. "You're up?" His voice was low, a little rough from the coffee. "Yeah." Emma pulled out a chair and sat across from him, her knee accidentally brushing against his leg under the table. That feeling, the warmth from his jeans, the heat from his skin underneath, made her shiver a little. Liam slid the second coffee cup toward her. Already made, already with 1 spoon of sugar, already stirred. Emma watched the light brown swirls dissolve into the milk, and she felt her throat tighten. "You're leaving early today," she said, her voice coming out rougher than she meant. "Yeah, a meeting at 9. Liam stood up, walked around the table, and leaned down. His lips touched her forehead. Not a kiss, just a light touch, enough for Emma to feel the warmth of his mouth before it was gone. "Eat breakfast, okay? There's fruit in the fridge, I already cut it up." She heard him put his shoes on in the hallway, the lock turning softly, his footsteps fading down the corridor. And Emma just sat there holding her coffee cup, feeling the warmth spread from her palms to her wrists to her arms, all the way to her chest where her heart was beating slowly. At lunch, Emma sat in her usual spot in the company cafeteria. She lifted a forkful of salad to her mouth, but hadn't taken a bite when Sarah dropped into the chair across from her, eyes wide, but slamming her phone on the table. "Okay, be honest," Sarah said, no greeting, no small talk. "Is Liam actually real?" Emma chewed her salad, the bitter taste of greens on her tongue. "Sarah." "I'm serious," Sarah continued, pointing at Emma across the table. "A guy who's handsome, kind, cooks well, sensitive, listens, knows exactly how to make your coffee, and remembers to cut up fruit before he leaves for work." "Emma, are you living in a movie?" Emma tried to smile, but the smile died on her lips when she saw Sarah's eyes. There was nothing joking about that look. It had something sharper, heavier. "I'm worried about you," Sarah said, her voice dropping. "I used to think Mark was the perfect man, remember? Then I found out he was texting his ex-girlfriend for the first 3 years of our marriage." Emma put her fork down. Her fingers unconsciously twisted the silver ring on her finger, the one Liam gave her for her 26th birthday. Not an engagement ring, but she'd never taken it off since that day. "Sarah," Emma said, her voice calmer than she actually felt, "he's not Mark. I'm not saying he's Mark." Sarah leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I'm just asking you one thing. A man this perfect. Have you ever wondered why?" Emma felt her palms sweat. She wiped her hands on her napkin, but the dampness stayed, a thin layer on her skin, making the silver ring slip under her fingers. "He went through some really hard things," Emma said, choosing her words carefully, and he told me he had to change a lot to become who he is now. "Change how?" He didn't go into details. Emma heard her voice weaken a little. "I don't think he's ready." Sarah looked at Emma for a long time. Then she sat up straight, sighed, and grabbed a piece of bread from Emma's plate. "I just want you to be careful. When something is too perfect, there's usually something being hidden." Emma didn't answer. She picked up her fork again, but the salad had no taste anymore. In her head, Sarah's question echoed like a wrong note in a familiar song. Why? That night, Emma got home before Liam. She opened the door, turned on the lights, and the apartment appeared before her like a still life painting. The brown couch, neatly arranged, the blanket folded over the armrest, the lamp by the bookshelf already on. Liam always did that, just in case she came home when it was dark. Emma stood in the doorway, her bag still on her shoulder, looking at this room, the space she'd lived in completely for 6 months, and wondered, do I actually know it? She took off her shoes, set her bag down, walked barefoot into the living room, her hand touching familiar things, the back of the couch, the wooden table, the spines of the books on the shelf. Everything felt real, very real. But that realness reminded her of Sarah's words. When something's too perfect. Emma sat down at Liam's desk. She hadn't meant to do this, but her feet carried her there and her body sat in the chair before her brain could argue. She looked at the dark computer screen and saw her face reflected back, wide eyes, breath held tight in her chest. I'm not looking for anything, she told herself. I'm just sitting here. But her fingers had already touched the mouse. The screen lit up and Emma found herself staring at the password screen. She knew the password. Liam had told her the first month when she needed to print something. It's your birthday, he'd said casually, so I don't have to remember. Emma typed the numbers. The screen opened and she saw an old message window. Liam must have left it open from the morning. She didn't mean to look, really. But her eyes had already scanned the screen and there was a line of blue text standing out among all the boring work messages. An old message marked from a while back, sent to a number without a name in the contacts. Emma read it. Free tonight? Can I bring your friend? Her fingers went ice cold. The cold started at her fingertips, spread to the back of her hands, to her wrists, and stopped somewhere in her chest where her heart had just skipped a beat. She looked at the date. 14 months ago. Back then, she and Liam had been dating for 3 months. 3 months where she thought she'd found the perfect man. 3 months where she slept in his arms every night, felt his steady breath by her ear, and believed she was safe. Emma couldn't breathe. Her lungs felt squeezed, and she opened her mouth to get air, but the air wouldn't come. All she could hear was her heart, too fast, too loud, like it was trying to escape her chest. And then she heard the key turn in the front door. Liam was home. Emma sat frozen, her hand on the mouse, her eyes glued to the screen. She couldn't move. Her body was frozen from the inside out. And all she could do was sit there, staring at the blue text, while outside in the hallway, familiar footsteps grew closer. Emma sat in front of the computer screen for 2 hours. It wasn't really a choice. Her body was nailed to the chair and her fingers, still ice cold from reading that first message, just kept scrolling down, as if something invisible was pulling them. Second message, she asked if I have a friend. I said yes. Third message, the same address, I'll send it. Emma read, and while she read, she realized she wasn't breathing. Her lungs were like a squeezed balloon, and when she forced herself to breathe in, the air came out as a tiny whistle in her throat. She kept scrolling. 12th message, she asked if I like you. I said yes. Is that a problem? Emma looked at the date, 13 months ago. She and Liam had been officially together for 2 months. 2 months where she remembered staying up all night just thinking about him, about how he smiled when she told work stories, about how he held her hand when they walked in the park. And while she was thinking about those things, he was sending someone an address. Emma took her hand off the mouse. She looked at her fingers. They were trembling, little tremors, like a small electric current running under her skin. She made a fist, but the shaking didn't stop. I should stop, she thought. I should close the computer and forget it. But her hand was back on the mouse before she could decide. 25th message. They're both fine, and don't worry. 30th message. No words, just another address, and an emoji Emma had never seen Liam use. A red lip emoji and a heart. Emma felt her stomach clench. Nausea rose in her throat, and she had to cover her mouth with her hand, forcing herself to swallow it back down. The sour taste of acid stuck to her tongue, mixing with the coffee from that morning, making a combination that made her want to actually throw up. She scrolled faster, like she could rush through this nightmare and wake up. 50th message, I know, I miss you too. Emma stopped. Her index finger froze on the mouse button, and she stared at those 4 words like if she looked long enough, they'd turn into something else. I miss you too. She didn't know who that person was, didn't know their name, their face, their voice, but she knew they had been in Liam's life, and Liam had missed them. Liam, the man who made her coffee every morning, who always cut fruit for her before leaving, who held her hand when they slept and never let go, even in his dreams. That man had sent a red lip emoji to someone else. Emma sat motionless. The sweat on her palms had gone cold, leaving a thin, sticky layer on her skin. And when she took her hand off the mouse, her fingerprints were left on the white plastic. She looked at the clock in the corner of the screen, 7:48 p.m. Liam would be home after 8. She had 12 minutes. Emma closed the message window. Her fingers pressed the mouse too hard, making a dry clicking sound from inside. She opened the browser history, erased every line, every trace. Then she shut the computer off, and the screen went black, reflecting her face. Eyes wide, cheeks slightly red, lips pressed so tight her jaw was stiff. Emma stood up. Her knees were weak, and she had to grab the edge of the desk to steady herself. That feeling, like the floor had been pulled out from under her, made her dizzy, and she stood there for a moment, hands gripping the wood, feeling the grain press into her palms. Then she heard the car, the familiar engine sound, the soft brake in front of the building. Emma knew that sound. She'd heard it hundreds of times, and then every time she'd felt warmth spread from her chest to her stomach. But this time, the sound made her jump, like someone had yelled in her ear. Her heart was pounding so hard she could see it through her shirt. Each beat lifting, falling, like a small animal trying to escape her chest. She heard the car door close, footsteps on the sidewalk, the building door open, then the elevator, and footsteps in the hallway, each step getting closer. Emma ran to the living room. She sat on the couch, grabbed a book off the table, opened it to a random page, and tried to read. But her eyes weren't looking at the words. They were looking at the empty space above the page, and in that space, she saw those messages still there, blue and white, like they'd been carved into the back of her eyelids. The key turned. The door opened. Liam walked in, and suddenly the room smelled like him, light cologne, leather jacket, a day's worth of living. Emma used to love that smell. She used to press her face into his neck and breathe deep, letting it fill her lungs, letting it become part of her. Now that smell made her nauseous. "You're home early?" Liam said, his voice warm as always. He took off his jacket, hung it up, and walked toward her. Emma looked at him. The room's light fell across his face, making familiar patterns of light and shadow, high cheekbones, a square jaw, those light brown eyes that always looked at her with such tenderness it made her melt. Now that tenderness made her spine cold. "Yeah," Emma said. Her voice sounded different. She could hear the difference, rougher, higher, like someone was squeezing her throat from inside. "I came home early." Liam sat beside her. His weight made the couch sink a little, and Emma felt herself tilt toward him, like there was its own gravity between them. She pushed her hands into the cushion to keep from falling into him. He leaned down, and his lips touched her forehead. That kiss, light, quick, automatic, used to make Emma feel protected. Used to make her think she was finally safe, that the hurt from the past was over, that life had given her a man who could heal everything. Now that kiss made her scalp go numb. Emma smiled. She could feel every muscle in her face pulling into that smile, cheek muscles tightening, lips lifting. And she knew what that smile looked like. She'd seen it in the mirror hundreds of times, and it was always the same. Soft, happy, enough to reassure anyone looking at her. But in her head, an image wouldn't go away. 2 girls. She didn't know what they looked like. Didn't know their hair color, their eye color, what their voices sounded like. But she saw them vaguely like shadows when you close your eyes, standing next to Liam in a room Emma had never been to. On nights she thought he was working late. "How was your day?" Liam asked. His hand reached up, gently pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. That feeling, fingertips touching her ear, the warmth of his skin, used to make her shiver with pleasure. Now it made her want to run. "Fine," Emma said. The smile was still on her face. "I'm fine." Liam looked at her. His eyes stayed on her face a little longer than usual, and Emma felt a wire stretch between them, a wire she knew could snap with the smallest movement. "Are you tired?" he asked. "You look a little pale." Pale. She wondered what her face looked like to him. Did she look like someone who'd seen a ghost? Like someone who'd just found out the person she loved most wasn't who she thought? "I have a headache," Emma said. That wasn't a lie. The back of her neck was throbbing, and the pain spread from her neck to the top of her head, like someone was squeezing her brain in a clamp. "I'll make you some tea." Liam stood up. His movements were quick, familiar. He'd done this hundreds of times, and every time Emma's heart had felt warmer. But this time, when he turned his back to go to the kitchen, Emma looked at his back, that broad back, those solid shoulders, that perfectly ironed white shirt, and she wondered, how many people have looked at this back? How many have pressed their face against it? She heard water pour into the kettle, the stove light, dishes clinking softly, the sounds of care, of attention, of love. Emma closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, the image was still there, him and two girls. No faces, but so clear she could see how he put his hand on their shoulders, how he smiled at them, how he... She opened her eyes. Her eyelids felt heavy, like tiny stones were pressing down on them. She looked toward the kitchen, where Liam was standing at the counter, his back still to her, and she saw his right hand, the hand that had just touched her hair, that put coffee in front of her every morning, that held hers while they slept, holding the kettle, pouring water into a cup, gentle and precise. That hand. Emma stared at that hand, and she wondered where it had been, who it had touched, what it had done on those nights she slept alone in her old apartment, believing he was working, believing he was thinking about her, believing she was safe. Liam turned around, cup in hand, walking toward her with that familiar smile, and Emma smiled back. She felt every muscle in her face pull up, every millimeter of skin stretch, every breath adjust to look normal. She felt the warm cup placed in her hands, the heat from the ceramic spreading into her palms. But it couldn't get through her cold, numb skin. "Thanks," she said. Liam sat beside her, and Emma felt his weight tilt the couch toward him, pulling her along. She let herself lean into his shoulder, a movement so familiar her body did it without thinking. His shoulder was warm, so warm. And while she leaned against him, Emma closed her eyes, and the image in her head still didn't go away. Him and two girls. No faces, but so clear she could see everything. She took a sip of tea. It was hot, a little bitter running down her throat, and she felt every millimeter it traveled. Throat, esophagus, stomach, like it was drawing a map inside her body. And in that map there were places she'd never known. Dark places, empty places, places that the man holding her had once belonged to someone else. "Do you want to talk about something?" Liam asked, his voice low and soft. Emma shook her head. She felt her hair brush against his collar, making a small rustling sound. "No," she said, "I just want to sit here." Liam didn't say anything more. He just held her hand a little tighter, and through her numb skin, Emma could still feel the warmth of his fingers. She leaned against him, drank her tea, and tried not to think about anything. But in her head, two girls were still standing there, next to Liam, in a room she'd never seen, and they were looking at her with faceless eyes. Emma smiled, and she kept smiling. 3 days passed, like 3 months. Emma brushed her teeth, changed her clothes, drank coffee, went to work, talked to coworkers, came home, cooked, watched TV, slept. She did all those things, and every one of them happened exactly like any other day. Like there was a copy of her living her life, while the real Emma sat somewhere inside her skull, watching through her eyes. Monday morning, Liam poured coffee for her. Emma watched his hand hold the pot, wrist slightly tilted, the dark liquid flowing into the cup in swirls, and she didn't see thoughtfulness anymore. She saw a man who had poured coffee for other people, on other mornings, in other rooms. She picked up the cup. The heat burned her fingertips, but she didn't let go. "You okay?" Liam asked. He sat across from her, head tilted slightly, eyes focused on her face with that familiar concern. Emma nodded. She felt the nod, neck muscles tightening, chin dropping, then lifting, and wondered if anyone could see how stiff the movement was. "Fine," she said. "I'm fine." Liam looked at her a moment longer. His eyes moved across her face, from eyes to lips, from lips to cheeks, like he was searching for something. Emma felt each place his eyes stopped like tiny pinpricks on her skin. "Didn't sleep well?" he asked. You have dark circles. Emma touched the skin under her eyes. Her fingers found a surface that was slightly swollen, slightly thin, like the skin had worn down after 3 sleepless nights. Maybe not, she said. Liam stood up, walked around the table, and sat in the chair next to her. His hand reached out, fingers open, heading toward her hand on the table. Emma watched his hand come closer. She saw the veins on the back of his hand, his fingertips a little red from holding the hot cup. The way his fingers curled, ready to wrap around hers. And she pulled her hand back. It happened fast. Just a quick pull, enough to lift her hand off the table and put it on her lap, under the table where he couldn't reach. But she saw his eyes change, just for a fraction of a second. Those light brown eyes got darker, like a small cloud passing in front of the sun. "What's wrong?" Liam asked. His voice was still gentle, but there was something underneath, something tense. Did something happen? Emma shook her head. She felt her neck muscles tighten as she turned, felt strands of hair hit her cheek, felt her breath come out hot through her nose. "Nothing," she said. "I'm just tired." Liam didn't say anything, and he sat there, his hands still on the table, fingers still open like they were waiting. And Emma looked at that hand, the hand that had held hers hundreds of times, the hand she'd thought was the safest place in the world. Now she couldn't touch it. At lunch, Emma sat in the cafeteria, her fork stabbing into her salad without bringing it to her mouth. She looked at the green leaves with holes in them, dressing dripping from the little punctures, and she thought about how those messages had punctured something inside her, too. Sarah sat down across from her, and Emma realized she'd been sitting at this table for 20 minutes without eating anything. "You look pale," Sarah said, her voice dropping. "What's going on with you?" Emma tried to shake her head, tried to say nothing, but her neck wouldn't move. Instead, she sat still, eyes on her salad plate. And she heard herself say, "Sarah, Liam, the someone." She stopped. Her throat was being squeezed, and the words, "He used to message other people. He used to date 2 girls at once. He's not who I thought," were somewhere between her tongue and the roof of her mouth. But they couldn't come out. "What about him?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. Emma bit her lower lip. She felt the skin peeling off in tiny pieces, the taste of blood starting to spread on her tongue. "He has a past," Emma said, "I think." Sarah sat up straight. The alertness in her eyes was gone, replaced by something softer, sadder. "Everyone has a past, Emma." "But I don't know what it is." Emma heard her voice crack at the end. "I just know there are things he hasn't told me." Sarah didn't say anything. She just put her hand on the table, not touching Emma, just leaving it there, like an open door. "I need to know," Emma said, and as she said those 3 words, she felt something shift inside her chest, like something heavy was sliding down, pressing into her stomach. "I have to know." That afternoon, Emma sat in front of her computer at work, phone in hand, thumb scrolling through contacts. She stopped at David, Liam's friend. David was Liam's best friend from college. Emma had met him a few times at small parties, enough to know that David talked a lot, laughed a lot, and couldn't keep a secret after 2 beers. Emma pressed call. She put the phone to her ear, and while she waited, she felt her heartbeat in her eardrums, each beat sounding like a drum. "Emma?" David's voice came through, cheerful as always. "This is a surprise. How are you?" "Hi, David," Emma said. She tried to make her voice sound normal, but she could hear the tension in it. "I wanted to ask you something, if you're not busy." "Yeah, not busy. Go ahead." Emma took a breath. The air filled her lungs, cool, but by the time it reached her chest, it had turned into something hot and heavy, pressing against her breastbone. "What was Liam like in the past?" she asked. "I'm just curious. He never talks much about college." On the other end of the line, David went quiet, just for a second. But that second was enough for Emma to feel sweat start beading on her palms, wetting the plastic phone case. "Why are you asking?" David said, his voice still cheerful, but something was different now, something careful creeping in. "Just curious," Emma said again. She heard her voice get a little higher. "He's so perfect, I can't believe he's real. He must have done some crazy stuff when he was younger, right?" She laughed. Emma tried to laugh, and she felt her face muscles pull into a smile, but that smile didn't reach anywhere. It just sat on the surface of her skin like a thin mask. David laughed too, but it was shorter than usual. "Well, everyone does stupid things when they're young." "Like what?" Emma asked. She didn't let go. She couldn't let go. Another silence. Longer this time. Emma could hear David breathing on the other end, and she wondered if he was looking around, thinking about how much to say. "Listen," David said, his voice lower now. "Liam is really different now. He's changed a lot." "Changed from what?" The question hung in the air. Emma felt it like something with weight, pressing on her ear, pressing on her throat, pressing on her whole body, frozen in the chair. "Look," David said, "if Liam wants you to know, he'll tell you. There are some things that shouldn't come from someone else." Emma felt heat rush to her face. Blood rushed to her cheeks, her forehead, her temples, and she felt each pulse there, each one a dull ache. "Did David?" Emma said, and she heard her voice shake. "I just want to know who I'm with." Silence, a long, heavy silence, like the air in the phone had frozen solid. Then David sighed. Emma heard that sigh, a long, slow breath, like he was letting go of something he'd been holding for a long time. Liam back then, David said, each word carefully chosen, was someone who didn't have control. He lived wild. A lot of relationships, a lot of nights, a lot of things I don't want to talk about. Emma sat still. She wasn't breathing. Her lungs were two empty bags, and she felt herself sinking into her office chair. "But that was 6 years ago," David said faster. "Since he met you, he's completely different. I've never seen Liam serious and happy like this. You get that? He changed because of you." Emma wanted to say something, but her throat made no sound. She just sat there, phone in hand, feeling the cold sweat on her palms, leaving a sticky layer on her skin. "Emma," David asked, "are you still there?" "Yeah," Emma said. Her voice was scratchy, like there was sand in her throat. "I'm here, thanks, David." She hung up, put the phone on the desk, and stared at it. The screen dimmed, reflecting her face. Wide eyes, red cheeks, lips pressed tight. A lot of relationships, she thought. A lot of nights. She touched her neck, feeling her pulse under her fingertips. Fast, too fast, like her heart was trying to make up for all the beats she'd missed while holding her breath. Emma opened her phone again. She scrolled through contacts and stopped at Jenny, Liam's old friend. She'd never called Jenny. She only had the number because Liam once asked her to pass along a message, and she'd saved it without knowing why. Now she knew. Her finger moved across the screen, stopping above the call button. She felt the weight of that finger. Heavy, so heavy, like her whole body was pressing down on that fingertip. She pressed. The dial tone rang in her ear, once, twice, 3 times. And Emma sat there, eyes staring into space, palms soaked with sweat, and she knew that when the person on the other end picked up, she wouldn't be able to stop. She would ask, she would know. And nothing would ever go back to the way it was. Jenny didn't pick up. Emma heard 3 long rings, then a voicemail message started playing, and she hung up before the beep. She put her phone down on the desk and realized she was breathing hard, like she'd just run a long way. She looked at the screen again. Jenny, Liam's old friend. She'd never met Jenny. She only knew her name, her number, and that this woman had appeared in those old messages with lines Emma still remembered clearly. "Do you miss me?" And "Are you free tonight?" Free. Emma put her phone in her pocket, stood up, and walked out of the office. Her feet moved across the gray carpet, and she felt each step like a hammer hitting the floor, each one heavier than the last. 2 days later, Emma sat in a small coffee shop near her work, across from a woman named Rachel. Liam's college friend, someone Emma had never met but found on Facebook through old photos from 7 years ago. Rachel agreed to meet after Emma messaged her. "I'm looking into Liam's past to surprise him for his birthday. Can you tell me some fun stories about him when he was younger?" Emma had come up with that lie while brushing her teeth, white toothpaste foam dripping from her mouth, as she looked in the mirror, seeing her own eyes light up in a strange way. Now, Rachel sat in front of her, holding a latte, and Emma could feel curiosity in the other woman's eyes. The way Rachel looked her up and down, like she was trying to place Emma somewhere in the picture of Liam she already had in her head. "You're Liam's girlfriend?" Rachel asked, her voice carrying something Emma couldn't quite read. "Yes," Emma said. She felt those 2 words come out of her throat, and they sounded smaller than she'd hoped. Rachel smiled. It wasn't a mean smile, but it made Emma feel like she was standing in front of a closed door, and Rachel was holding the key. "Liam must be really different now," Rachel said, like she was thinking of something amusing. "What was he like back then?" Emma asked. She put her hands on her lap, under the table, and felt her fingers lacing together, squeezing so tight her knuckles cracked. Rachel took a sip of coffee, put her cup down, and looked at Emma with eyes she couldn't read. Are you sure you want to know? Sometimes knowing your partner's past isn't a good thing. I want to know, Emma said, and she heard her voice come out harder, firmer than she actually felt inside. Rachel shrugged. Well, Liam was pretty famous back then. Handsome, charming, and never short of company. She paused, smiling. I mean, never. Emma felt her stomach clench. She remembered the messages, the addresses, the red lip emojis, the "Do you miss me?" And now they weren't just words on a screen anymore. They had faces, voices, evenings Emma had never seen. Did he have multiple relationships at once? Emma asked. She felt each word leaving her mouth, hot and heavy. Rachel looked at Emma for a moment. That look, sympathetic but also a little guarded, made Emma want to shrink back. I don't want to badmouth my friend, Rachel said, but the truth is, Liam back then wasn't faithful. He lived wild. Some weeks he'd date 3 different girls, and he didn't really hide it. Emma put her hands on the table. She didn't remember lifting them, but now her hands were on the wood, and she could see her fingers shaking. But that was 6 or 7 years ago, Rachel added, her voice softer now. I heard Liam is really different now. I haven't seen him, but everyone says he changed completely after... Rachel stopped. Emma looked at her, waiting, but Rachel just shook her head. After what? Emma asked. Her voice was rough. I'm not sure, Rachel said, but at some point Liam disappeared from social life. No bars, no friends, no replies to messages. People thought he was depressed or something. Then he showed up again, but he was a different person. Emma sat still. She felt Rachel's words sinking into her skin, like cold water seeping through thin clothes. A different person. She thought about Liam now, the man who made her coffee every morning, who cut fruit for the fridge, who held her hand when they slept. And she wondered, is he really a different person or just a different version? That night, Emma came home early. She sat on the couch, trying to read, but the words were just black and white streaks sliding past her eyes without meaning. She heard the door open, Liam walk in, and her body went stiff. He sat down next to her, and Emma felt his weight tilt the couch, like always. But now, that weight made her want to stand up and walk away. How was your day? Liam asked, his voice warm. Fine, Emma said. She sat still, not looking at him, eyes still on her book. A silence. Emma heard Liam breathe, slow, steady, and she wondered if he could feel the tension radiating off her like heat. Then she heard herself say, have you ever done anything crazy, anything impulsive? The question came out before she could think. Emma felt it in her throat, a hot lump of words, leaving a bitter taste on her tongue after she said them. Liam turned to look at her. Emma still didn't look at him, but she felt his eyes on her face like a flashlight shining into darkness. Why are you asking? His voice was gentle. Just curious. Emma turned a page, even though she hadn't finished the one before. I've never seen you do anything impulsive. You're always calm, always in control. Liam was quiet for a moment. Emma heard him breathe out, a long, soft breath. I have, he said. His voice got lower, and Emma felt the change, like he'd just opened a small door, just a crack. But that was someone else. A long time ago. Emma stopped turning pages. Her hand rested on the paper, and she felt the rough surface under her fingertips. What was that person like? She asked. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. A person who... Liam paused. Emma heard him swallow, a dry sound in his throat. A person who didn't know what he wanted. A person who hurt other people because he was hurting too. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. It started at the back of her neck, where tiny hairs stood up, ran down her backbone, spread to her shoulders, and stopped at her lower back, where she felt every muscle tighten. Is that person still here? Emma asked. She didn't know why she asked that. She didn't know what answer she wanted. Liam didn't answer right away. Emma felt his silence like something heavy, pressing on her shoulders, pressing on her chest, pressing on the whole room. No, he said finally. That person isn't here anymore. Emma looked at the page. The words were still there, but she couldn't read them. Her eyes saw, but didn't see. Her ears heard, but didn't understand. A person who didn't know what he wanted. She thought about the messages, the addresses, the red lip emojis, and she wondered, is the man sitting next to me now really someone else or just the old someone who got better at hiding? 3 days later, a Saturday afternoon, Emma was sitting in Liam's living room when the doorbell rang. Liam was in the kitchen, and Emma heard him put down his knife on the cutting board and walk to the hallway. She didn't mean to look toward the door, but when he opened it, she heard a woman's voice. A low voice. Something almost smooth about it, like she was used to being welcomed. "Liam, long time no see." Emma stood up. She didn't remember getting up, but now she was standing in the middle of the living room, eyes fixed on the front door. The woman walked in. She was tall, with long dark hair, wearing a tight red dress, and she had a smile Emma could see from far away. The smile of someone who knew she was beautiful, knew she had power, and was used to using it. Emma looked at that woman, and a cold feeling ran from the top of her head to her heels. She had seen this woman before, not in person, but in those old messages there was a profile picture. Emma had scrolled past it without stopping, but enough to remember the face. And now that face was here, in Liam's apartment, standing less than 10 feet away. "Hi," the woman said, her eyes running up and down Emma, the smile still there. "You must be Liam's girlfriend. I'm Chloe." Chloe. Emma remembered that name. She remembered it appearing in the messages, sent along with an address, with a red lip emoji with a line, "I'm thinking about you." Emma wanted to say something. She wanted to open her mouth, make a sound, do something other than stand there like a statue. But her body wouldn't respond. Her lips were stuck together, her tongue was like a dry cotton ball in her mouth, and all she could do was stare. Stare at Chloe, the woman from the messages, standing in Liam's doorway, smiling at Liam, talking to Liam, like showing up here was the most normal thing in the world. And Emma felt a pain, not in her heart, but in her whole body, like someone had thrown her into a tub of ice water. And her skin was shrinking, every cell shrinking, trying to protect something inside that was already too fragile. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her feet stuck to the wood floor. She watched Liam and Chloe in the hallway, and her body recorded every tiny detail. How Liam leaned back slightly, not forward. How his hands were in his pockets, not reaching out to shake or touch. How his eyes looked at Chloe with friendliness, but with just enough distance. Chloe laughed, her voice echoing in the narrow hallway. "I heard you were living here, so I stopped by. Wanted to say hi. It's been so long." "Yeah," Liam said, his voice calm. "I'm doing well. How about you?" "I'm the same. Still at the gallery." Chloe turned to look at Emma, her smile still there. "I didn't know you had a girlfriend. I heard you've been pretty closed off ever since..." She stopped, not finishing the sentence. Emma saw a quick look pass between them, a look she couldn't read, but it made her scalp go numb. "Do you want to come in for something to drink?" Liam asked, his voice still even. No, I was just in the neighborhood." Chloe waved her hand like she was brushing away the idea of staying. "I should go. It's good to see you're okay." She turned, and as she did, her eyes swept over Emma one more time. That look lingered a moment longer, and Emma felt it like a finger touching her skin. Not painful, but making the hairs on her arms stand up. "Nice to meet you," Chloe said. Then she walked to the door, and just before stepping out, she turned back, throwing out a sentence like she'd just remembered something. "You're so different now, Liam. She's lucky." The door closed. Emma heard the lock turn, footsteps in the hallway, the elevator open and close, and then silence. A thick, heavy silence, like the air in the room had been replaced with something dense and slow. She still hadn't moved. Her feet on the wood floor, she could feel every grain pressing into her soles through her thin socks. She felt her weight on her heels, and she felt a dull ache starting from her heels, up to her calves, up to her knees. Liam turned around. He walked toward her, and Emma saw his face. Still calm, still steady, but something in his eyes, a careful watchfulness, like he was trying to read tiny writing on her face. "That was an old friend," he said, like he needed to explain, "from college." Emma nodded. She felt that nod, neck muscles tightening, chin dropping, then lifting. And it came out so smooth, so natural. She wondered if she was a better actress than she thought. "Yeah," she said, "I saw." She sat down on the couch. Her knees buckled, and she felt relief as her weight shifted from her legs to the seat. She put her hands on her thighs and saw her fingers. They weren't shaking anymore. They'd stopped at some point, and now they lay still on her jeans, pale white, like someone else's fingers. Liam sat beside her. The couch sank, and Emma felt that weight. So familiar, her body had already started leaning toward him before she realized. She sat up straight. "Do you want to ask me anything?" Liam said. His voice was soft, but there was carefulness in it, like he was walking on thin ice. Emma turned to look at him. This was her chance. She knew it was her chance. She could ask, "Who is Chloe? What were you to her? Were those messages real? What kind of person were you?" She opened her mouth, and what came out was, "What do you want for dinner?" Liam looked at her. His eyes stayed on her face, and Emma felt every millimeter of that look like drops of hot water on her skin. On her forehead, her nose, her lips, her chin. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. She sat still, looking straight into his eyes, and she smiled. That smile. Emma felt it on her face. Cheek muscles pulling up, lips lifting. And it looked exactly like the smile she'd given him for the past 6 months. But now, it tasted different. Tasted like running away. "I'm not that hungry," Liam said, but his eyes still hadn't left her face. "What's wrong, Emma?" That question, "What's wrong?" rang in the space between them like a bell. Emma had heard that question so many times this past week, and each time it left another small scratch somewhere inside her. "Nothing's wrong," she said. Her voice was even, flat, like a lake with no wind. Liam was quiet. He didn't say anything, but Emma saw his hand on his thigh, fingers curling, gripping his pants. She looked at that hand, the hand that had held hers, touched her hair, wrapped around her, and she saw his knuckles go white from squeezing so tight. "Are you sure?" he asked. His voice was lower, and Emma heard something in it she'd never heard before. Maybe worry, maybe fear, maybe both. "Sure," Emma said. She stood up. Her knees were a little weak, and she had to push against the arm of the couch to steady herself. She walked toward the kitchen, opened the fridge, looked at the neatly organized shelves, pre-cut fruit, washed vegetables, meat divided into small portions. Liam had done all of that. Liam always did all of that. Emma closed the fridge. She stood there, hands still on the handle, feeling the cold metal sink into her palm. She looked at the white refrigerator door, and in its faint reflection, she saw Liam's shape sitting on the couch, his back slightly curved, his head slightly down. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the floor, and Emma saw his back through the white paint, and she wondered if he was thinking about Chloe, about what happened between them, about nights she'd never known about. She went back to the living room. Liam looked up when she walked in, and Emma saw his eyes. They weren't the eyes of the perfect man anymore. They were the eyes of someone trying to understand something and failing. "I got water," Emma said, holding up her hand, even though her hand was empty. Liam looked at her empty hand. He looked at it for a long moment, and Emma felt the silence between them growing, like a balloon being blown up to its limit. "Emma," he said. One word, just one word, but the way he said it, slow, soft, like he was holding something fragile, made Emma feel a thread connecting them, vibrating. She stood still. She knew if she sat down, if she stayed in this space, she wouldn't be able to hold it together anymore. Everything that had built up in her chest all week, the shock, the curiosity, the obsession, the torment, was pushing up into her throat. And one more question from him, one more look, and she'd break. "I'm going to shower," Emma said. She turned, walked toward the bedroom. She felt Liam's eyes on her back, and she felt each step on the wood floor. They were faster than usual, like she was trying to escape something chasing her. She closed the bathroom door, locked it, and leaned against it. She felt the cold wood through her clothes, and she felt her heart beat, too fast, too hard, like it wanted to escape her chest. Emma looked in the mirror. The face in the mirror looked back, wide eyes, dilated pupils, red cheeks, lips pressed tight. The face of someone who just escaped. She didn't ask, she'd had her chance, and she didn't ask. And now, standing in the bathroom, one wooden door away from Liam, she wondered, what am I afraid of? The answer, or what happens after I get it? She turned on the water. The sound of rushing water filled the small room, and Emma stood under the spray, feeling hot drops fall on her shoulders, her back, her head. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her lids, she saw Chloe, standing in the doorway again, that smile on her face, and the words echoed in her head. "You're so different now, Liam." Emma put her hands to her face, letting water run through her fingers, and she wondered, who were you before? And are you really someone else now, or am I just seeing what I want to see? Out there, behind the bathroom door, Liam was still sitting on the couch. Emma couldn't see him, but she knew he was there. She felt his presence like a weight in the space, a silence waiting. And she knew that when she walked out, he would look at her with those eyes, worried eyes. Eyes of someone who knew something was very wrong but didn't know where to start fixing it. Emma stood under the water, and she let it run over her, over the thoughts spinning in her head, over the questions with no answers. She didn't know what she would do when she walked out. She just knew she couldn't stay in here forever. That weekend, Liam said he needed to clean out the storage closet. Emma heard his voice from the bedroom, where he was changing into work clothes, and she sat on the couch holding a cup of tea that had gone cold a long time ago. She didn't remember when she'd taken her last sip, only that the ceramic under her palms had grown warm, blending with the warmth of her skin. "Do you want to come?" Liam walked out wearing an old gray t-shirt, the elbows slightly faded. Emma looked at him. She'd lived with this man for 6 months, and she'd never seen him wear that shirt. It belonged to a different time, before she existed in his life. "Sure," she said, "I'll come." The storage closet was in the building's basement, a small windowless room, fluorescent lights shining down on cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other. The air here was cool, smelling of old paper and dust, the smell of things that had been forgotten. Liam opened boxes one by one, sorting through things. Emma squatted beside him, pulling out old books, CDs, random items he'd stored away years ago. Her hands touched each object, and she wondered if each one carried a story she'd never heard. "Throw this away," Liam said, putting a stack of old magazines into a trash bag. Emma nodded. She picked up the magazines, and when her hand reached the bottom of the box, she saw a small brown box, tucked in the darkest corner, under everything. She pulled it out. The box had no label, its lid closed tight, its surface covered with a thin layer of dust. Emma put it on her lap, and she felt its weight. Not heavy, but somehow important, like it held something more valuable than it looked. She opened the lid. Inside were old things. A silver bracelet that had darkened with age, a small card with a heart on it, and a photograph. Emma picked up the photo. It was a boy, maybe 17 or 18, standing next to an older woman. That boy was Liam. Emma recognized him right away, even though his face was younger, thinner, and his eyes had something different, a wildness she'd never seen in him now. The woman stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, and she had a smile, a tired smile, but warm. Emma looked at that woman's face, and she knew immediately. The eyes, the shape of the face, the way the corners of her mouth lifted when she smiled. All of it were different versions of the features on Liam's face. His mother? Emma turned the photo over, and on the back was handwriting. Liam and Mom, June, when he was 17. She put the photo down, and her hand touched a folded piece of paper at the bottom of the box. She opened it. It was a diagnosis sheet, a hospital's name at the top. Emma read the lines, and each word stabbed into her eyes like broken glass. Diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, terminal stage. Date of diagnosis, June 15th. Below that, another line written in black ink, shaky handwriting. Mom won't make it to Christmas. I wasn't there for her at the end. I chose to run away. Emma sat still. Her fingers held the paper, and she felt its surface under her skin. Thin, brittle, like one strong movement would make it crumble. She heard Liam. He was behind her, less than 6 feet away. Emma didn't know how long he'd been standing there, but she felt his presence like a cold wall rising behind her. She turned around. Liam stood still holding an old book, but his eyes weren't on the book. They were on her hands, on the photo, on the diagnosis sheet, and on his face there was no anger, no surprise, just exhaustion, kind of surrender, like he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. And now that it was here, he didn't have the strength to fight it anymore. Emma felt the silence between them. It wasn't like the silences before. It was heavier, thicker, and it had a taste. The taste of old dust, of years gone by, of things that couldn't be said out loud. "I'm sorry, sweetie," Emma said, her voice cracked somewhere in her throat. "I didn't mean to. I just found..." Liam didn't answer. He put the book down, and Emma heard the cover hit the concrete floor, a dry sound echoing in the small room. He walked toward her. Each step was slow, and Emma watched his feet move on the cement, heavy steps, like he was carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. He sat down next to her on the cold storage room floor. Emma felt the warmth of his body as he sat, and she felt a trembling, not from her but from him. A small tremor, like a tiny electric current running under his skin. Liam looked at the photo in her hand. He looked at it for a long time, and Emma saw his eyes. Those light brown eyes she'd looked into 1,000 times now held something different, a wetness, a glimmer she'd never seen before. "My mother," he said. His voice was rough, like his throat had been dry for a long time. "She died when I was 17. Emma didn't say anything. She sat still holding the photo, and she felt its weight. Not just the weight of the paper, but the weight of what it represented. Liam raised his hand, but didn't touch the photo. His hand stopped a few inches away, and Emma saw his fingers shaking. A small shake, but clear, like his body was remembering something his mind wanted to forget. "I wasn't there." Well, he said, when she needed me most, I wasn't there." Emma felt those words like small stones falling into her chest. Each word had its own weight, and when they hit each other, they made an echo in her ribs. "I chose to run away," Liam continued, his voice still rough, but now something else appeared, a rawness, like he was peeling off layers of armor he'd worn for years. "I couldn't handle seeing her in pain. I couldn't handle knowing I couldn't save her, so I left. I went to far places, did crazy things, stayed with people I didn't have to love." He stopped. Emma heard him swallow, a dry sound, like his throat was trying to swallow something too big. "And when I came back, she was gone." Emma looked at the diagnosis sheet in her hand. She looked at the words, "terminal stage," and the handwritten line at the bottom, and she felt the full weight of what Liam had kept hidden for 11 years. "So that's who you became," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The person in those messages." Liam turned to look at her. His eyes held no surprise, just confirmation, like he'd known all along that she'd seen what she wasn't supposed to see. "You've known for a while, haven't you?" he asked. His voice was rough, but not accusing, just deeply tired, the surrender of someone who'd carried a burden too long. "About who I used to be?" Emma looked into his eyes. She saw waiting there, fear and something like relief, as if being found out was also a kind of freedom. She nodded. That nod wasn't a simple movement. Emma felt it in her whole body, from the base of her skull, where a dull ache began, down to her breastbone, where her heart was slowing, down to her stomach, where an emptiness was opening up. "I saw the messages," she said, "on your computer." Liam closed his eyes. Emma watched his eyelids shut, and she saw blue veins rising under the thin skin at his temples. He sat still for a moment, and in that silence, Emma heard his breathing, shallow, fast, like he was holding something back. Then he opened his eyes. They were red now, and Emma saw in them a nakedness she'd never seen in anyone before. "So," he said, his voice rough, each word pulled from somewhere deep, "let me tell you the story of someone who was very scared." He stopped. Emma saw his hand on the cement floor, fingers curling, gripping the cold surface like he was trying to hold on to something so he wouldn't be swept away. "That person," Liam said, "used to think that if he didn't love anyone, he wouldn't lose anyone. That person used to think his body could belong to anyone, as long as his heart belonged to no one. That person used to wake up next to people whose names he couldn't remember, and he thought that was how to survive." His voice broke at the end of the sentence, and Emma saw a tear roll from the corner of his eye down his cheek, falling onto his old gray t-shirt, leaving a small wet spot on his shoulder. Emma didn't say anything. She just sat there on the cold storage room floor, still holding the photo of a 17-year-old boy and his mother who was gone, and she felt the walls she'd been building all week collapsing, the walls of pretending, of running, of questions too scary to ask. Liam turned to look at her. His eyes were red, his face wet, and on that face there was no trace of the perfect man. Just a person, tired, hurt, and finally unable to run anymore. "That's who I was," he said, "and I can't change the past. But I can tell you about it, if you want to hear." Emma sat on the storage room floor, her back against the cold concrete wall. Liam sat across from her, legs stretched out, hands on his knees. The fluorescent light from the ceiling fell across his face, making light and shadow patterns that made him look older than his age. He started talking. "My mom died when I was 17, he said, his voice even, like he was reading something memorized. "She had pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, it was too late." Emma looked at him. She saw his hands on his knees, fingers laced together, knuckles white from squeezing. I wasn't there, Liam said. When she needed me most, I chose to be somewhere else, with other people doing things I don't want to talk about. I thought if I didn't see her pain, it wouldn't exist. He stopped. Emma heard him swallow a dry sound in the quiet room. And when I came back, she was gone. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to say sorry. I just saw an empty bed and flowers someone had left there. Emma felt each word he said like raindrops falling into her chest. Each one was cold, each one heavy. And as they gathered, they made a deep puddle inside her. After that, I wasn't myself anymore, Liam said. Or maybe I'd never been myself. I started going to bars, drinking, going to parties where I didn't know the host. I woke up in the mornings next to people whose names I didn't remember, and I thought that was normal. His voice was still even, but Emma saw a tremor starting at the corner of his mouth, a small twitch she'd never seen before. I thought if I didn't love anyone, I wouldn't lose anyone, he said. If I didn't attach to anyone, no one could leave me. So I lived like a ghost. I gave away my body, but never my heart. I thought that was how to survive. Emma looked at him, and she saw his eyes. Those light brown eyes she'd loved from the first time she saw them, now looking somewhere far away, somewhere she couldn't reach. One-night stands, Liam said. Women who came and went. I don't remember most of their names. I just remember bodies, breaths, sounds. And every morning when they left, I felt relieved because they left and I didn't have to pretend anymore. Emma felt her hands clenching. She didn't realize she'd made fists, but now her nails were digging into her palms, leaving red crescent marks. Then one night, Liam said, and his voice changed. It wasn't even any more. It started to crack, like a wall breaking under pressure. One night, after a party, I went home. I'd drunk a lot. I didn't remember who I'd been with, but I remembered my body. It was dirty, it was heavy, it didn't feel like mine anymore. He stopped. Emma saw his chest heaving, his breathing shallow and fast. I stood in front of the mirror, he said, his voice so rough, Emma had to hold her breath to hear. And I saw a stranger. Someone with empty eyes, pale skin, hickeys on his neck I didn't remember getting. I looked into that person's eyes and I realized that was me. And I hated that person so much I couldn't stand it. His voice broke. Emma saw tears, not the quiet ones from before, but tears pouring out, running down his cheeks, falling onto his old gray t-shirt. I punched the mirror, he said, his voice choked. I wanted to break that face. I wanted to kill that person. And when the mirror shattered, the glass cut my hand and I saw blood and I thought, this is it. This is the only real thing left on my body. Liam held up his right hand. Emma saw, for the first time, really saw, the faint scars on the back of his hand, silver white lines crossing each other hidden under the fine hairs. She'd looked at that hand 1,000 times, but she'd never looked closely, never looked close enough to see the scars. That was the last night of the old person, Liam said. I sat on the bathroom floor, my hand bleeding, and I decided that if I wasn't going to die, I had to change. Not change a little, change completely. Become someone else. Someone my mother could be proud of. Someone worth loving. He wiped his face with his sleeve, and Emma saw the gray t-shirt darken around his cheeks. I spent 5 years building this person, he said. 5 years learning to listen, to care, to love without being afraid. 5 years to become the man you met. Liam turned to look at Emma. His eyes were red, his face wet, and in that look, Emma didn't see strength, didn't see calm, didn't see the perfect man she'd fallen in love with. She saw a 17-year-old boy who'd lost his mother, a young man who'd lost himself, a person who'd spent 5 years saving himself. And then I met you, he said, his voice fading like a candle about to go out. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I didn't have to try to be someone else. I could just be myself. But then you found out about my past, and I saw your eyes change. I saw fear. I saw doubt. And I knew the person I spent 5 years building, the person I thought was real, still wasn't enough. Emma heard those words, and she felt a pain start at her breastbone, spread to her sides, down to her stomach, out to her arms and legs. She wanted to say something, but her throat was squeezed shut. It wasn't a change, Liam said, and his voice wasn't shaking anymore. It went flat, like a frozen lake. It was a rescue, and I spent 5 years building this person, a person worth loving. He stopped. Emma saw his hand on the cement floor, fingers spread, and she saw the silver white scars on the back of his hand, scars that had been there for 7 years, from that night he punched the mirror. But I guess, he said, his voice so soft Emma had to lean forward to hear. I failed. Those 3 words fell into the space like stones dropping into a well. Emma heard them echo in her chest, and she felt their weight pressing down on her whole body. Liam stood up. His movements were slow, like his body had aged 10 years in 1 hour. Emma saw his knees shake a little as he straightened up, and she saw him put his hand on the wall to steady himself. He didn't look at her. His eyes were on the brown box, the photo, the diagnosis sheet, all the pieces of a past he'd tried to bury. I'm going to go, he said. His voice cracked in the middle, and Emma saw him swallow, like he was trying to swallow something too big for his throat. He turned away. Emma heard his footsteps on the cement floor, slow, heavy, missing the steadiness of the man who walked out the door every morning with a coffee cup in his hand. These were the footsteps of someone who'd just put down a burden he'd carried for 11 years, and now didn't have the strength to carry anything else. The storage room door opened, then closed. Emma sat still on the floor. She felt the concrete wall behind her. It was cold, and the cold was seeping through her clothes, through her skin, into her bones. She felt her fingers. They'd stopped shaking at some point, and now they lay still on her thighs, pale white, like the blood had drained out of them. In front of her, the brown box was still open, the photo still there, a 17-year-old boy and his mother, who was gone, both of them smiling, neither knowing that in a few months she would leave and that boy would lose everything. Emma picked up the photo. She looked at the woman's face, and she saw warmth there, patience, love. She looked at the boy's face, and she saw innocence, trust, peace, all the things that would be broken just a few months later. She put the photo down, and her hand touched the diagnosis sheet. She read the handwritten line at the bottom. Mom won't make it to Christmas. I wasn't there for her at the end. I chose to run away. Emma closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw Liam. Not the Liam of now, but 17-year-old Liam standing outside a hospital door, afraid to walk in. She saw that boy turn around, walk away, each step taking him farther from his dying mother. And she saw that boy grow up, become a young man with empty eyes, with hickeys on his neck, with mornings waking up next to people whose names he didn't remember. Then she saw him, Liam now, standing in front of a mirror, looking at his own face and punching the glass. Emma opened her eyes. Her face was wet. She didn't realize she'd been crying, but now tears were running down her cheeks, falling onto the diagnosis sheet, smearing the words. She looked at the storage room door, closed, and behind it was a long hallway, stairs, the apartment where Liam was. She didn't know what he was doing. She didn't know if he was crying, if he was sitting on the couch staring at nothing, if he was thinking he'd failed. Emma picked up the photo and the diagnosis sheet, put them back in the brown box. She closed the lid and sat there, hands on the box, feeling its rough surface under her palms. She didn't know what she would say when she saw him again. She didn't know what she could say to erase his last words, "I failed," from his mind. But she knew one thing, he hadn't failed. He hadn't failed when he spent 5 years rebuilding himself. He hadn't failed when he chose to become a better person, and he hadn't failed when he loved her. Emma stood up. Her knees ached from sitting too long on the concrete floor, and she had to lean on the wall to steady herself. She picked up the brown box, held it against her chest, and walked toward the door. Outside the storage room, the basement hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights shone down on white walls, making a cold light. No shadows, but no warmth either. Emma climbed the stairs. Each step echoed in the open space, and she felt the weight of the box in her hands. Not heavy, but carrying everything Liam had hidden for 11 years. She reached the apartment door. She stood there for a moment, her hand on the handle, feeling the cold metal sink into her palm. Through the door, she heard nothing. No TV, no footsteps, no Liam. Emma opened the door. The apartment was dark. Only the light from the hallway spilled in, drawing a pale rectangle on the floor. Emma stood in the doorway, looking into the darkness, searching for Liam. He wasn't in the living room. She looked at the bedroom, door closed. She looked at the bathroom, door open, dark inside. Emma put the box on the table. She stood in the middle of the living room, in the dark, and she felt his absence like a hole in the space. Something that had been there, that had made this room warm and alive, and now was gone. She walked toward the bedroom door. Her hand touched the handle, and she felt a faint vibration from the other side. Not the vibration of sound, but the vibration of presence. He was in there. Emma didn't knock. She stood there, hand still on the handle, and she thought about what he'd said. A person worth loving. She turned the handle. Emma opened the bedroom door. It was pitch black inside. She stood in the doorway, her eyes trying to adjust to the darkness, and she saw Liam sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to her. He hadn't turned on any lights, hadn't opened the curtains, hadn't done anything except sit there, hands on his thighs, head slightly bowed. Emma walked in. She heard her footsteps on the wood floor, and she felt a change in the air. It was heavier, quieter, like this room had stopped breathing. She sat down next to him, leaving a little space between them. Not touching him, but close enough to feel the warmth coming off his body. They sat like that for a while. Emma didn't know how long, maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour. She just knew she could feel every breath he took, every rise and fall of his chest, and she could feel the silence between them. No longer the heavy silence of the past few days, but a different silence. The silence of people who had just put down a heavy load. "You didn't fail," Emma said. Her voice came out in the darkness, small but clear. Liam didn't answer. Emma saw his shoulders shake a little, and a small tremor, but he still didn't say anything. "I was wrong," she continued. "I was scared. Not because of what you did, but because I was scared that someone who used to be like that could never really love me completely." She heard herself say those words, and she felt how true they were in her chest. A heavy truth, one that had been there a long time, but only now could she name it. "I was scared I was just one person out of many," she said. "I was scared that one day you'd wake up and realize I wasn't special, and you'd look for someone else. I was scared that everything you did for me, coffee every morning, fruit in the fridge, holding my hand when we sleep, that it was all just practice moves, things you'd done with other people before me." Her voice cracked at the end, and Emma felt tears running down her cheeks, falling onto her hands in her lap. "But now I understand," she said. "What you do for me isn't a routine, it's a choice. Every morning you make me coffee, you choose to do that. Every time you cut fruit and put it in the fridge, you choose to think about me. And someone who lost everything, someone who was so scared he couldn't love anyone, someone like that who still chooses to love, that's real love." Liam turned to look at her. In the darkness, Emma couldn't see his face clearly, but she could feel his breath. Warm, close, and trembling in a way she'd never felt before. "I'm not scared anymore," she said. "I'm scared of losing you. But I'm not scared of your past, because that past made you who you are today, the man I love." The last words came out like a breath she'd been holding for a very long time. Emma felt their weight leave her body, and she felt lighter, like something had been lifted off her shoulders. Liam didn't say anything, but Emma felt his hand, the hand with the silver white scars, finding hers in the darkness. His fingers touched the back of her hand, cold, but no longer shaking. They sat like that, hand on hand, in the darkness of the room, and Emma felt every pulse from his wrist traveling into her hand. Slow, steady, like a whisper that he was still here, he was still there. 3 days later, Liam still hadn't come back. Emma understood. She understood that what he'd told her wasn't a story you could fix in one night. She understood that he needed time, and that him not calling wasn't running away. It was respect. He was giving her space to think, to decide. But she also understood that she didn't need that space. Emma sat on the couch, phone in hand. The screen lit up, showing her contacts, and she looked at Liam's name. Still there. Still the same familiar letters, but now she looked at it with different eyes. She didn't call. She knew if she called, he would pick up right away, and he would come back, and everything would go back to how it was. But she also knew that how it was didn't exist anymore. They needed something new. Emma put her phone on the table. She looked at it, and she watched the screen go dark, reflecting her face, eyes no longer swollen, cheeks no longer red, lips no longer cracked from biting. She looked a little older, but also calmer. She called Sarah. The ringing tone sounded, and Emma felt her heartbeat start to speed up. She didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't know how to explain everything that had happened in one phone call. "Emma?" Sarah's voice came through, worried. "Are you okay? I've been calling you." "I'm okay," Emma said. She heard her own voice, and she realized it was true. She was okay. Not the kind of okay from those days of pretending, but the kind of okay from someone who had stopped running. "Where's Liam? What happened?" Emma looked out the window. Outside, the city lights were coming on, orange and yellow lights starting to glow one by one, like small fires in the falling darkness. "Sarah," Emma said, "I found out the truth about him." Silence on the other end. Emma heard Sarah breathing faster than usual. "And is it bad?" Sarah asked, her voice careful. Emma thought about the messages, the addresses, the red lip emojis. She thought about the man who punched a mirror because he couldn't stand his own face. She thought about the 17-year-old boy who couldn't walk into a hospital room to say goodbye to his mother. "It's not bad," Emma said, "and it's sad." She heard her own voice and she realized she couldn't say more. Not because she didn't want to, but because what Liam had told her wasn't her story to tell. It was his. And if he wanted to share it with someone, that would be his choice. "I don't know how to explain," Emma said, "but I'm okay, really." Sarah was quiet for a moment, and she said softly, "Do you need me to come over?" Emma looked around the apartment. She looked at the couch where she and Liam used to watch TV, at the dining table where he put coffee in front of her every morning, at the bedroom door where he'd sat in the darkness 3 nights ago. "No," she said, "I need to be alone." After hanging up, Emma sat on the couch and looked at her silent phone. It was still there, lying on the table, screen dark. Emma knew that if she picked it up, if she pressed Liam's name, everything would change. But she also knew that everything had already changed. The question wasn't whether she would call. The question was what she wanted to build from that change. She looked out the window. All the lights outside were on now, making a carpet of orange and yellow spread out under the night sky. She looked at those lights and she thought about the 5 years Liam had spent rebuilding himself. 5 years of waking up every morning and choosing to be a better person. 5 years of looking in the mirror and not wanting to punch it anymore. Emma realized she'd been asking the wrong question. All those days she'd been asking herself, did he really change? Is he still that person? Can he really love me completely? But now, sitting alone in the empty apartment, she realized that wasn't the right question. The question wasn't, can he change? Because he already had changed. He'd spent 5 years changing, and she'd seen the result of that change in every gesture, every action, every way he loved her every day. The real question was, can I accept the person that change created? Emma closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her lids, she saw Liam. Not the Liam of the past, not the young man with empty eyes, but Liam now. The man who made her coffee every morning, who cut fruit for the fridge, who held her hand when they slept. She saw him, and she saw that he wasn't a perfect version. He was a version built from brokenness, from loss, from years of being lost and years of finding his way back. And maybe because of that, he could love her in a way no one else could. Emma opened her eyes. She picked up her phone and she looked at the screen. Her finger moved across the glass, stopping at Liam's name. She didn't call. Instead, she opened messages and she typed, I don't need space. I need you. She looked at those 3 words, I need you, and she felt how true they were in every part of her, every muscle, every heartbeat. She pressed send. The message disappeared from the screen, and Emma sat there, phone in hand, eyes staring into space. She didn't know how Liam would answer. She didn't know if he was somewhere with phone service. She didn't know if he was ready to come back. But she knew one thing. This time, she wasn't running. This time, she was staying. Her phone buzzed. Emma looked at the screen, a message from Liam, just 4 words. I'm already here. Emma heard the door open. Emma didn't remember leaving the apartment. She just remembered that, after reading, I'm already here. Her feet had carried her out the door, down the stairs, into the street. She wasn't wearing a jacket, didn't have her bag, hadn't locked the door. She just held her phone, and she walked. Now she was standing outside Liam's door. Her hand was on the handle, and she felt the cold metal sink into her palm. She didn't knock. She turned the handle, and the door opened. The apartment was pitch black. No lights, no sound, just the familiar smell of cologne and wood. But now mixed with something else, the smell of absence, of days when no one had lived in this space. Emma looked toward the balcony. The glass door was open, and through it she saw a shape sitting on a chair back to her. The city lights from far away fell on him, making a faint outline around his shoulders and head. She walked out to the balcony. Liam sat on a plastic chair, hands on his thighs, eyes looking out at the night city. He didn't turn when she walked out. Maybe he didn't hear her, or maybe he heard, but didn't have the strength to turn around. Emma stood behind him for a moment. She looked at his shoulders that had been so strong, that had held her up whenever she leaned into him, now thinner, narrower, like he'd shrunk over the past few days. She saw his hair was messy, his collar not folded neatly like always. He looked drained. Not the drained of someone who'd had a long day, but the drained of someone who'd sat in one place too long. Who'd stared into space too long, who'd carried something too heavy. Emma pulled the chair next to him and sat down. The chair creaked under her weight, and Liam finally turned. His eyes looked at her, red-rimmed, dark circles underneath, skin pale. She'd never seen him like this. Even on his worst days, he always kept himself together, looked put together. But now all the armor had fallen away, and he sat before her with all the nakedness of someone who had nothing left to hide. Emma didn't say anything. She just sat next to him, looking out at the city, and let herself listen to his breathing, slow, heavy, like each breath took effort. They sat like that for a while, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. Emma didn't know. She just knew that the air between them wasn't tense anymore. It was heavy, but heavy in the way a blanket is heavy on a cold night. "I'm sorry," Emma said. Her voice came out in the quiet space, soft but clear. Liam turned to look at her, and she saw his eyes widen a little, like her words were the last thing he expected. "I'm sorry I didn't ask you sooner," she said. She felt each word as it left her mouth, hot, heavy with a salty taste of tears rising from her throat. "And I'm sorry I snooped through your messages." Liam didn't answer right away. He looked at her, and Emma saw his eyes, already red, start to get wet. She saw his lips pressed together, his jaw tighten, like he was trying to hold something back. "You don't have to apologize," he said, his voice so rough Emma had to lean in to hear. "You had a right to know. I kept it from you too long." "That's not it," Emma said. She turned toward him, and she felt her knee touch his through their clothes. That feeling, the warmth of his body, the life in his body, made her shiver. "I didn't have the right to invade your privacy. Whatever your past is, it's yours. I took it without asking." Liam looked at her. His eyes had no defenses now, no exhaustion, just a waiting, like he was waiting for her to say something he needed to hear. "And I'm sorry I didn't trust you," Emma said, and her voice started to break. "I saw those messages, and I decided you were still that person. I didn't give you a chance to explain. I made up a story in my head, and I believed that story more than I believed you." Tears started falling. She felt them run down her cheeks, drip off her chin, and she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall on her hands, on her pants, on the cold cement floor of the balcony. I was scared," she said. "I was scared I wasn't special enough for you to stop. I was scared that one day you'd wake up and realize I was just one of many. I was scared that your love wasn't real." Liam raised his hand. Emma saw his hand, the hand with the silver-white scars, coming toward her face. His fingers touched her cheek, wiping away a tear, and she felt his trembling through his fingertips. "But now I understand," Emma said, her voice choked. "You didn't change for me. You changed for yourself. Because you couldn't stand being that person one more day. And I'm just lucky enough to meet you after you became who you are." She stopped. Her breathing was fast, and she felt her heart pounding in her chest, like it was trying to say something she hadn't said yet. "You were right," she said. "It wasn't a change, it was a healing, and She looked straight into his eyes. Those eyes were wet now, and Emma saw waiting in them fear and something like hope, a small light in the darkness. "And I love the person who healed," she said. The last words came out like a breath held for too long. Emma felt their weight leave her body, and she saw Liam, the calm, mature, disciplined man, crying. He wasn't crying loudly, no sobbing, no heavy choking sounds. Just tears running down his face, his lips pressed tight, his shoulders shaking. Emma raised her hand. She put her palm on his cheek, and she felt his tears wet on her skin. She felt the stubble under her hand, the warmth of his skin, the life running under the thin layer of skin. And then Liam held her. Not the gentle, careful hugs from before. This was the hug of someone who was drowning and had just been pulled up. He pulled her into him, held her tight, like if he let go, she would disappear. Emma felt his arms wrap around her back, his fingers dig into her shoulders, and she felt his face press into her hair, his breath hot on her scalp. She held him back, she wrapped her arms around his neck, and she felt his body shaking, a trembling not from cold, but from things held too long finally being let out. They sat like that on the balcony, under the city lights, and Emma felt every beat of his heart through his shirt. It was fast, strong, and she wondered if he could feel her heart beating the same way. "I'm sorry," Liam said, his voice muffled in her hair. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared. I was scared that if you knew, you'd look at me differently. I was scared you'd see the old me, though, and you couldn't love who I am now." Emma tightened her arms around his neck. She felt the warmth of his body, the smell of him. Faded cologne, the smell of days without showering, the smell of someone who'd sat alone too long. "You were wrong," she said. "I don't see the old you. I see someone who was hurt and spent 5 years healing. I see someone who was scared and learned how to love. That's who I love. That's the only one I want." Liam didn't say anything, but Emma felt his arms tighten, and she felt his tears fall on her hair, wet and hot. They sat like that for a long time. Wind from the city blew onto the balcony, cool, but Emma wasn't cold. She felt the warmth of his body, and she felt a peace she'd never felt before. No more walls, no more secrets, no more unanswered questions, no more silent doubts, no more pretending every morning when she looked in the mirror and said everything was fine. For the first time, they sat together with nothing between them. Emma felt the difference in her body. Her neck wasn't stiff, her shoulders weren't raised in defense, her breathing didn't need to be controlled. She just sat there in his arms and let her body relax. "Are you cold?" Liam asked, his voice still rough but steadier. "No," Emma said. She felt how true that answer was in every part of her. She wasn't cold. She'd never been this warm. Liam pulled back just enough to look at her face. The city lights fell on his face, and Emma saw his eyes, still red, still wet. But now there was something else, a relief, a peace, something like light after a storm. "I love you," he said. Those 3 words weren't the first time he'd said them, but the way he said them now, slow, clear, like each word was carefully chosen, gave them a different weight. "I love you too," Emma said. She felt those 3 words in her chest, and she knew that this time, when she said them, there was no part of her that doubted. No small corner wondering if it was true. She loved him. Loved the person who had suffered, who had been lost, who had punched a mirror because he couldn't stand his own face. And loved the person who spent 5 years rebuilding himself, who chose every morning to be better, who loved her in a way no one else could. Liam raised his hand, and Emma felt his fingers run through her hair, gently pushing it back. That feeling, the warmth of his fingertips, the gentleness of the movement, made her close her eyes. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked, his voice a whisper. Emma opened her eyes. She looked at him, the man who had just put down an 11-year burden, the man who had cried in her arms, the man who had shown her everything he had, the good and the bad, the strong and the fragile. "We're going to be okay," she said. And when she said those words, she felt how true they were in every cell of her body. Not because they were perfect, not because the past could be erased, but because they had chosen to stay with each other, not for the illusion of perfection, but for the truth of who they really were. Wind from the city blew in, carrying the cold of the night. But Emma didn't shiver. She sat in Liam's arms, and she felt the warmth of his body, and she knew that from now on, everything would be different. No more walls, no more secrets, no more pretending. Just 2 real people sitting together in the night, and for the first time, nothing between them. Emma pressed her face into his shoulder, and she felt his heartbeat through his shirt, slowing, steadying, like a song finding its rhythm again. And she knew that finally, after all those days of doubt and fear, they had found the only thing worth finding, the truth about each other, and the courage to accept it. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her lids, she saw a road stretching ahead. Not a smooth road, not a road without bumps, but a road they would walk together, with eyes open, with open hearts, and nothing left to hide. That was all she needed. 3 months later, Emma woke up on a Saturday morning, and the first thing she noticed was the rain falling outside the window. Small drops hit the glass in steady little taps, and she lay still for a moment, listening, feeling the warmth of the blanket over her. Liam had been up for a while. Emma knew because the spot next to her was cold. She smelled coffee from the living room, and she smiled. She didn't look at him like a perfect statue anymore. That had happened naturally, not overnight, but day by day, in small moments. Emma realized she used to look at Liam like he was a work of art. Beautiful, perfect. But she was always afraid that if she looked too close, she'd see cracks. Now she saw those cracks, and strangely, he was still beautiful. Not the beauty of perfection, but the beauty of something that had been broken and put back together. Emma sat up, her bare feet touching the wood floor. She felt the cold of the planks, and she stood up, walking to the living room. Liam was sitting on the couch, coffee cup in hand, eyes looking out the window where raindrops were sliding down the glass. He was wearing that old gray t-shirt, the one he'd worn in the storage closet that day, and Emma saw the scars on the back of his hand when he put the cup down. She didn't look at those scars with curiosity or fear anymore. She looked at them as part of him, like the way she looked at the scratches on the wooden table they used every day, not covering them up, not painting over them, just accepting that they were part of something that had lived through years. "You're up?" Liam turned, his voice warm. "Yeah," Emma said. She walked over and sat beside him, and her body automatically leaned toward him. But this time she didn't sit up straight. She let herself lean into his shoulder, and she felt the warmth of his body through his shirt. "It's been raining since morning," Liam said. "I thought we could stay home today." Emma looked out the window. The rain was still falling steadily, and the drops on the glass made little winding trails, like small maps of unnamed roads. "What should we do at home?" "Cook," Liam said. "I saw some things in the fridge. We could make something." Emma heard his voice, and she noticed the difference. It wasn't tense, wasn't trying to be perfect. It was ordinary, like any man's voice waking up on a rainy morning and thinking about dinner. "Okay," she said. That afternoon they were in the kitchen. Liam stood at the stove, knife in hand, cutting vegetables, and Emma sat on the counter, legs swinging, holding an onion and peeling it. The kitchen air was warm, smelling of garlic frying and broth simmering. Emma felt the heat from the stove, and she felt the quiet between them. Not the heavy quiet of the days when they were hiding things, but the quiet of two people used to each other's presence. "Do you want to hear something?" Liam asked, his eyes still on the carrot he was cutting evenly. Emma stopped peeling. She looked at him, and she saw his shoulders tense a little. Not in a stressed way, but getting ready. "What?" she asked. "Something old," Liam said. "Something not pretty." Emma put the onion down. She wiped her hands on her pants, and she sat still, not saying anything, just waiting. Liam put the knife down. He turned, leaned his back against the counter, and looked out the window where the rain was still falling. The light from outside fell on his face, making light and shadow patterns, and Emma saw him looking somewhere far away, somewhere not in this kitchen. "Once," he said, his voice slow, "I dated a girl for 3 months. Her name was Maya. She was good, really good. And I treated her like she didn't exist." Emma didn't say anything. She felt her heartbeat normal, not faster, not slower. She just listened. "I went to her place when I wanted, and I disappeared when I didn't," Liam said. "I never called back. I never answered messages. And when she asked me what we were, I said I didn't know and I didn't care." He stopped. Emma saw his hand on the counter, fingers curling slightly. "One night she called me at 3 a.m. She was crying. She said she didn't understand why I did that, what she did wrong, if she could change something." His voice got softer. "And I told her there was nothing to change because she was nothing." Emma felt the silence after those words. It wasn't heavy, but it was deep, like an old well where someone had just dropped a stone and they were waiting to hear the water echo. "I thought about her a lot," Liam said. "In the years I was changing, I thought about Maya. I looked for her online, but I didn't dare reach out. I didn't have the right to apologize. I could only live with what I did and try not to do it to anyone else." He turned to look at Emma. His eyes held no fear, no waiting, just truth. "That's who I was," he said. "Someone who could hurt people without even realizing it. And I can't change that. I can only live with it and every day choose not to be that person anymore." Emma looked at him. She looked at his face, the face of a man who had done terrible things and spent 5 years learning to be better. And she felt in her chest a peace. Not the peace of someone who didn't know, but the peace of someone who knew everything and still chose to stay. Do you want to contact her? Emma asked. Liam shook his head. No, I don't have the right to show up in her life just to ease my guilt. If she's forgotten, I don't have the right to remind her. If she hasn't forgotten, I don't have the right to make her remember more. Emma nodded. She understood. She understood that some mistakes can't be fixed with apologies. Some wounds can't be healed with regret. And she understood that Liam had accepted that. Accepted living with what he'd done, not trying to erase it, not trying to justify it, just every day choosing to be someone else. Thank you for telling me, Emma said. She jumped off the counter, stood in front of him, and put her hand on his chest, where his heart was beating. She felt that beat through his shirt, slow and steady, and she felt the warmth of his skin. I'm not scared, she said. I'm not scared, and I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're someone who did bad things and chose not to do them anymore. That's not a bad person. That's someone who grew up. Liam looked at her. His eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying. He just stood there, her hand on his chest, and she felt his heartbeat slowly steady, like a song finding its rhythm. I love you, he said. I know, Emma said, and I love you. That night they sat on the couch, full from the dinner they'd cooked together. Outside, the rain had stopped, but drops still hung on the window, reflecting the city lights into small glowing dots. Emma leaned into Liam's shoulder. She felt his arm around her, his fingers gently stroking her hair, and she felt the warmth of his body, warm and steady. She closed her eyes and she thought about the early days, the days when she looked at Liam and saw a perfect statue, a man with no scratches, no mistakes, no past. She loved that statue, but she was also scared of it, because the statue wasn't real. Now, the man beside her was real. He had scars on his hands, ugly stories in his past, fears he was still learning to face. He wasn't perfect, and that made her love him more. Emma opened her eyes. She looked out the window where the city lights shimmered in the night. She felt safe. Not the safety of believing the person she loved had no past, but the safety of knowing all of that past and still feeling protected. That safety didn't come from perfection. It came from truth. What are you thinking about? Liam asked, his voice a whisper in her ear. Emma smiled. She felt that smile on her lips. Not the fake smile from those early days, but the smile of someone who had stopped running, stopped being scared, stopped looking for perfection in a world that didn't have it. I was thinking, she said, that for the first time I feel truly safe. Liam didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He understood. He held her hand a little tighter, and Emma felt the warmth of his fingers, those scarred fingers, the fingers that had punched a mirror because he couldn't stand himself, the fingers that now held her hand, gentle, steady, like she was the most precious thing he'd ever had. Emma closed her eyes. She let herself sink into his warmth, into his steady heartbeat, into the quiet of the room. And she thought about the pages ahead. Pages they would write together, not on clean white paper, but on paper that already had eraser marks, smudges, old lines that had been rewritten. She didn't know what those pages would tell. She didn't know what challenges they would face, what fears, what hurts. But she knew one thing. They would write them together. No hiding, no pretending, no looking for perfection. Just truth and the courage to accept it. Emma rested her head on Liam's shoulder, and she felt his breathing, steady, warm, like a whisper that he was still here, he was still there, he wasn't going anywhere. Outside the window, the city lights still shimmered in the night, and in the small apartment, two people sat together. No wedding rings, no empty promises, just a love that had been tested by truth and had grown stronger because of it. Emma closed her eyes and let herself drift to sleep in the arms of the man she loved, with the first real safety she'd ever known. Not because his past was a blank page, but because they were writing new pages together. And that was all she needed.